The Zapirian armada drifted through the void like a school of luminous predators, their crystalline hulls shimmering with pulsing blue-green energy. The fleet was a masterpiece of luminescent engineering, sleek, angular, and utterly lethal. Hundreds of ships, each a geometric wonder of living crystal and translucent composites, formed an impenetrable wall of force. At its heart, the Sovereign Radiance, flagship of High Commander Zapkel, hummed with the quiet confidence of an empire that had never known defeat. Zapkel stood upon the command dais, his chitinous fingers tracing the holographic display before him. The war against the human colonies had been swift, brutal, and until now, utterly one-sided. The humans had fought with desperation. Yes, but desperation was no match for the precision of Zapirian technology. Their ships burned, their defenses crumbled, their pleas for mercy had been met with cold silence. A single blip flickered on the edge of the tactical display. Zapkel's secondary eyes narrowed. A mistake. Surely, some sensor echo, a glitch in the crystalline data flow. But the blip remained, unwavering. "Quilex," he murmured, his voice a low, resonant hum. The scientist, his carapace gleaming under the ambient glow of the bridge's energy cores, stepped forward. "High Commander, explain this." Quilex's antennae twitched as he interfaced with the ship's systems. A ripple of unease passed through his limbs. "It appears to be a vessel, human in origin." A murmur spread through the bridge. Zapkel's mandibles flexed in amusement. "One ship? One ship?" Quilex confirmed. The tactical display zoomed in, revealing the lone human vessel, a blocky, inelegant thing, its hull scarred and patched in ways no Zapirian engineer would tolerate. No graceful curves, no luminous energy signatures, just cold, brutal pragmatism. Zapkel exhaled, the sound a soft chitter of disdain. "They send a single warship against the might of the Zapirian armada. Is this a surrender? A distraction?" Quilex hesitated. "It is broadcasting a signal. Let us hear it." The bridge's crystalline calm system crackled to life. A human voice, female, calm, utterly devoid of fear, filled the chamber. "This is Colonel Jennifer Dixon of the Earth Defense Vessel, Promised Blade. You were warned. You were given terms. You chose to ignore them." Zapkel's amusement faded. The human continued. "You have slaughtered civilians, burned worlds, broken every law of war our species ever wrote. And so, as promised, we are coming for you." Then laughter, not from Zapkel, but from the officers around him. One ship against hundreds. The arrogance of it was staggering. Quilex did not laugh. His antennae remained rigid, his primary eyes locked onto the sensor readings. "High Commander, the energy signature." Zapkel glanced at the display and froze. The human ship's reactors were spiking, not in the erratic bursts of a dying vessel, but in a controlled, terrifying crescendo. Power levels climbed beyond anything the Zapirian sensors could quantify. The Promised Blade wasn't just a warship, it was a weapon, and it was charging. Zapkel's blood ran cold. Somewhere in the void, a single human vessel prepared to keep its promise, and the Zapirian armada, for the first time in its history, knew fear. The Promised Blade hung in the void, like a sliver of polished obsidian, its angular hull drinking in the starlight. To the Zapirian armada, it was an anomaly, a single warship, alone, against the might of 100 crystalline dreadnoughts. The laughter of Zapkel's officers still echoed through the command spire, but the High Commander's crest had stiffened, his bioluminescent veins pulsing an uneasy teal. Something was wrong. The human ship was silent now. Its transmission ended, but its reactors thrummed with a deep rhythmic pulse that resonated through the Zapirian sensors like the heartbeat of something ancient and wrathful. Quilex, the fleet's foremost xenotech analyst, had never seen energy readings like this. His secondary eyes flickered as he parsed the data, his chitinous fingers trembling over the holographic display. "High Commander," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the hum of the bridge. "That ship, it isn't just powered, it's awake." Zapkel's mandibles twitched. "Explain." Quilex hesitated. The readings defied logic. The promised blade's energy signature wasn't just climbing. It was changing, shifting in ways that shouldn't be possible. The core wasn't a reactor in any conventional sense. It was something else, something alive. "Sir," Quilex finally said, "their power source, it's not fusion, not antimatter. It's biological." A ripple of unease passed through the bridge. The Zapirians prided themselves on their mastery of crystalline energy. But this was different. This was human engineering, raw, unfiltered, and utterly unpredictable. Then the promised blade moved, not with the graceful arcs of Zapirian vessels, but with a brutal mechanical precision. It rotated on its axis, its prow aligning with the heart of the armada. The motion was deliberate, a challenge. Zapkel's instincts screamed at him to fire, to obliterate this insolent relic before it could. A flicker, a distortion in space. Then the promised blade was gone. Not cloaked, not vanished into some fold of subspace. The Zapirian sensors howled in protest, their crystalline matrices overloading as they struggled to comprehend the absence. For 3 heartbeats, there was nothing but silence. Then reality screamed. The promised blade reappeared. Not where it had been, but inside the formation, its blackened hull, now wreathed in crackling arcs of violet energy. The nearest Zapirian cruiser, the luminous Will, had no time to react. One moment, it hung in perfect formation. The next, its crystalline armor rippled, warping like liquid before the entire starboard flank detonated in a storm of shattered glass and molten alloy. Alarms shrieked across the armada. Zapkel's command spire shuddered as emergency protocols activated, the translucent walls flickering with damage reports. What in the name of the first hive was that? One of his sub-commanders hissed. Quilex's voice was hollow, a spatial shear. They didn't move through space. They cut it. Zapkel's blood ran cold. The humans had promised retribution. They had not promised it would be fair. On the view screen, the promised blade's weapons unfolded. Not turrets or cannons, but claws, serrated and gleaming. The ship lunged, and the void itself seemed to recoil. The Zapirian armada had come expecting a battle. They were about to learn what it meant to be hunted. The luminous Will's wreckage tumbled through the void, its shattered crystalline hull bleeding blue-green plasma like a dying star. Zapkel's mandibles clenched as the tactical display flickered, recalculating trajectories, reassessing threats, redefining war. The promised blade moved like nothing the Zapirians had ever seen. It didn't bank. It didn't turn. It twisted. Space itself warped around it, the ship's silhouette blurring as if reality refused to acknowledge its presence fully. One moment it was there, hanging in the black, like a predator sizing its prey. The next, a Zapirian frigate, the echo of dawn, simply came apart. No impact, no beam of light or projectile. Just a shudder, a ripple across its luminescent plating, and then the vessel split down the middle, as though an invisible blade had carved through it. Quilex's voice was barely audible over the chaos. "They're not just cutting space, they're weaponizing its fractures." Zapkel's claws dug into the command console, the organic metal yielding under his grip. This wasn't battle. This was butchery. The humans had warned them. They had promised. Colonel Jennifer Dixon exhaled slowly, watching the carnage unfold through the promised blade's neural interface. The ship didn't have screens. It didn't need them. The vessel spoke to her, its systems woven into her nervous system like an extension of her own body. She felt every kill, every scream, every promise kept. "Sergeant," she murmured, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. Jackson's response was immediate, his consciousness linked to the ship's secondary systems. reading multiple hostiles reorienting. They're trying to flank us. Dixon almost smiled. Let them try. The Zapirian armada scrambled, their formations dissolving into chaos. Ships that had moved with the precision of a hive now scattered like startled insects, their crystalline hulls pulsing with erratic energy signatures. Zapkel's mind raced. This wasn't supposed to happen. The humans were supposed to be weak, fragile, bound by crude physics and slower, fan-light limitations. But the promised blade defied all of it. It moved faster than their sensors could track. It struck harder than their shields could withstand. And worst of all, it remembered. Every ship it destroyed, every life it took, was another name etched into its blackened hull. Another oath fulfilled. Quilek's voice cut through the panic. Commander, their energy signature. It's not just propulsion, it's learning. Zapkel's blood turned to ice. The humans hadn't just built a warship. They had built a vengeance. The promised blade shuddered as another Zapirian cruiser detonated, its core overloading in a burst of blue-green fire. Dixon didn't flinch. She had stopped flinching a long time ago. Jackson's voice was grim. They are trying to jump. Some of them are spooling up their drives. Dixon closed her eyes. The ship answered. Space screamed as the promised blade's claws flexed, reality itself tearing like wet paper. The fleeing Zapirian vessels, half submerged in their jump trajectories, were ripped back into real space, their hulls buckling under forces they were never meant to endure. One by one, they died, not with honor, not with dignity, but as prey. Zapkel's command spire trembled as the last of his escorts vanished from the tactical display. The promised blade loomed ahead, its silhouette growing larger, darker. Quilek whispered what they both knew. They never lied to us. Zapkel's claws tightened. They hadn't, and that was the most terrifying thing of all. The promised blade hung in the void like a predator savoring the stillness before the kill. Zapkel's command spire pulsed with frantic energy, its crystalline walls flickering between blue and sickly green as the ship's bioluminescent veins struggled to compensate for the damage. The air tasted metallic, thick with the acrid tang of scorched circuits and leaking coolant. His mandibles twitched, his mind racing through tactical projections that all ended the same way: annihilation. Quilek stood beside him, his normally immaculate carapace now dulled by stress, his antennae rigid with tension. The scientist's claws trembled as they danced over the holographic displays, each flicker of data confirming what they already knew. They had underestimated the humans, not just in firepower, not just in technology, but in resolve. The promised blade wasn't just a warship, it was a promise kept, and humanity never broke its word. Inside the human vessel, Colonel Jennifer Dixon exhaled slowly, her fingers resting lightly on the armrests of her command throne. The ship hummed around her, a deep resonant vibration that wasn't just engines or systems, it was alive. A living weapon forged from the ashes of 1,000 broken oaths. Sergeant Jackson's voice crackled over the comm, steady despite the carnage unfolding outside. All escape vectors locked down. They're not slipping away this time. Dixon didn't answer. She didn't need to, the ship knew. It remembered, just as she did. Zapkel's tactical display flared crimson as the promised blade's weapons array cycled to full readiness. The human vessel didn't move like a machine. It moved like something alive, its maneuvers too fluid, too instinctive. Quilek's voice was hollow. They built it to hunt us. Not just to fight, not just to win. The realization settled over Zapkel like a suffocating shroud. The humans hadn't just advanced. They had evolved. Their warships weren't tools. They were extensions of their will. And this one had been waiting. Dixon's fingers curled into fists. The Zapirian armada had come expecting a battle. They would leave with a lesson. The promised blade surged forward, its engines flaring like a star's last breath. Reality itself seemed to warp around it, the void trembling in its wake. Zapkel's ship shuddered as the human vessel closed the distance, its silhouette blotting out the stars. For the first time in his life, the Zapirian commander felt something alien, not of death, but of the certainty in the human's vengeance. Quilek's voice was barely a whisper. "We should have listened." Zapkel didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. The promised blade opened fire. The promised blade did not simply attack, it unmade. Zapkel's tactical display dissolved into chaos as the human vessel's weapons tore through the vanguard of his fleet. The first volley was not plasma, not kinetics, not anything the Zapirian databases recognized. It was something worse. Reality fractures, Quilek's claws dug into the crystalline console, his bioluminescent veins pulsing erratically as the sensors screamed. The human weaponry didn't just pierce shields, it bypassed them entirely, as if the very concept of defense had been rewritten. The beams struck, and where they touched, Zapirian hulls unfolded, their elegant crystalline structures splitting at the seams like overripe fruit. Zapkel's mandibles clenched. This was not warfare as he understood it. This was violation. Colonel Dixon watched the carnage unfold from the promised blade's command throne, her expression unreadable. The ship's neural interface pulsed against her temples, feeding her every tremor of the battle in real time. She didn't need holograms or displays. The vessel was her, and she was hungry. Sergeant Jackson stood at her flank, his augmented optics tracking the devastation with cold precision. "They're breaking formation," he murmured. Dixon didn't smile. "No, they're learning." The Zapirians had assumed their numbers would overwhelm. They had assumed their technology was superior. They had assumed wrong. Zapkel's flagship, the Luminous Will, shuddered as a near miss sent cascades of blue-green energy rippling across its shields. The human vessel moved like liquid shadow, slipping between salvos with impossible grace. Every shot the Zapirians fired was either absorbed by the promised blade's adaptive armor or simply dodged, as if the ship could predict their actions before they even thought them. Quilek's voice was hollow. "I've mapped our firing patterns. They're playing with us." Zapkel finished, the truth bitter on his tongue. This was no desperate last stand. This was a demonstration. The promised blade pivoted, its main cannon humming to life. The weapon didn't glow. It drained, sucking in the surrounding light, the very stars dimming as if recoiling from its hunger. Zapkel's spines flattened against his carapace. Then it fired. The beam was blacker than void, a scar across existence. It struck the Luminous Will's sister ship, the Eternal Radiance, and for a single horrifying moment, nothing happened. Then the Zapirian vessel collapsed, folding inward like paper in a fist, its crystalline hull shattering into fractal dust. No explosion, no debris, just absence. Quilek's made a sound no Zapirian throat should have been capable of. Dixon's voice, when it crackled across the comms, was calm. "This was your last warning." Zapkel's mind raced. Every doctrine, every stratagem, every scrap of military wisdom he possessed was useless. The humans had not just surpassed them, they had redefined war, and they had done it alone. One promise. The promised blade moved again, its engines flaring like a predator circling wounded prey. Zapkel understood now. This wasn't a battle. It was an answer, and the answer was no. The promised blade drifted like a specter through the void, its blackened hull drinking in the ambient starlight. The Zapirian armada, once a glittering constellation of crystalline might, now lay fractured. Their formations broken, their confidence shattered. Zapkel's command spire pulsed with frantic energy, its bioluminescent panels flickering as damage reports flooded in. His mandibles twitched, a nervous reflex he had not felt since his larval trials. The humans had not just fought, they had unmade his fleet certainty. Quilek hunched over the sensor array, his carapace plates shifting in distress. The readings made no sense. The human ship's energy signature was wrong, a paradox of impossible physics. It absorbed scans rather than reflecting them, as if the vessel were less a construct of metal and more a wound in reality itself. "High Commander," Quilex rasped, his voice modulator crackling with static. "Their weapon, it does not destroy, it erases." Zapkel's claws tightened around the command rail. He had seen it. The eternal radiance had not been torn apart by force. It had simply ceased to be, as if the universe had decided it no longer deserved existence. And now the human ship was moving again. Not charging, not fleeing. Inside the promised blade, Colonel Jennifer Dixon exhaled slowly, her fingers resting lightly on the tactical display. The Zapirians had stopped firing. Good, that meant they were learning. Sergeant Jackson stood at her shoulder, his cybernetic eye flickering as it processed the alien fleet's panicked maneuvers. "They're regrouping," he muttered, "but not attacking. They're waiting." Dixon nodded. "They're waiting to see what we do next." The bridge was silent save for the low hum of the ship's core, a sound more felt than heard, a vibration in the bones. The promised blade was not like other human vessels. It was not built for war, it was built for promises, and humanity kept its promises. Zapkel's mind raced. Every instinct screamed at him to retreat, to regroup with the greater fleet, and return with overwhelming force. But something deeper, something primal, held him in place. They could have killed us all by now. The realization was a blade in his thorax. The human ship had disabled 3 vessels with surgical precision. It had annihilated a 4th without hesitation. And yet, it had not struck the command spire. It had not fired on the retreating scouts. It was choosing its targets. Quilex hissed, his antennae trembling. "They are not just destroying us, they are teaching us." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Zapkel's carapace felt too tight. The humans had not come for conquest. They had not come for vengeance. They had come to deliver a message, and the message was this: "You do not dictate terms to us." The promised blade pivoted, its engines flaring briefly as it adjusted course. The Zapirian fleet tensed, weapon systems cycling in reflexive panic. But the human ship did not attack. Instead, it activated a new system. A pulse of energy rippled outward, invisible to the naked eye but screaming across every Zapirian sensor. Quilex recoiled as his display erupted with data, a transmission, raw and unfiltered, flooding their comms. Not threats, images flickered across the crystalline view. Screens, human colonies burning under Zapirian bombardment. Children pulled from rubble, the hollow eyes of survivors. A single phrase, rendered in perfect Zapirian glyphs: "We remember." Zapkel's breath caught. This was not a battle, it was a reckoning, and the promised blade was not done. The promised blade hung in the void, like a silent specter, its blackened hull drinking in the ambient starlight. To the Zapirian armada, it was an anomaly, a single warship against a fleet of crystalline dreadnoughts. Yet it radiated a presence that made their bioluminescent weapon arrays flicker in hesitation. Zapkel's mandibles twitched, his neural tendrils pulsing with unease. The human vessel had not fired, had not even raised its shields in defiance. Instead, it had shown them the cost of their arrogance, the weight of their cruelty. The images still burned behind his eyes. Human cities reduced to molten glass, the bodies of the young half buried in debris. And then those 2 words: "We remember." A promise, a warning. Quilex's talons scraped against his console, his normally precise movements erratic. His sensors screamed at him, not from incoming fire, but from the sheer wrongness of the human ship's energy signature. It wasn't just a vessel, it was a tomb, a monument, a blade forged from the bones of the dead. Then the promised blade moved, not toward them, not away, a rippled, distorted space around it, the fabric of reality groaning as if under immense pressure. The Zapirian fleet's targeting arrays flared in alarm, crystalline matrices recalculating trajectories. But there was nothing to shoot at. The human ship wasn't evading, it was unfolding. Quilek's breath hitched as his display fractured into static. High Commander. The promised blade split. Not in explosion, not in destruction, but in revelation. Its armored plates peeled back, like the petals of some night, blooming flower, revealing not a reactor core, not a weapon, but a gate. A yawning maw of blackened steel and writhing energy, pulsing with a rhythm that matched no known Zapirian frequency. And from it, they came, ships, dozens of them, hundreds. Not entirely, their hulls were scarred, their silhouettes jagged. Some bore the skeletal remains of Zapirian cruisers fused into their superstructures. Others were patchwork monstrosities of reclaimed armor and jury-rigged weaponry. Their engines burned not with the clean blue-green of crystalline drives, but with the sickly amber glow of repurposed Zapirian power cores. Quilek's blood ran cold. These were not reinforcements. They were salvage. The dead ships of the Zapirian armada, the ones lost in battle, the ones scuttled after failed campaigns. They had not been destroyed. They had been taken, stripped, reforged, and now they returned. The lead vessel, a grotesque amalgamation of human engineering and Zapirian wreckage, pulsed its thrusters once, a signal. Then the transmission came, not from the promised blade. A voice, synthesized, yet unmistakably human, echoed across the comms. You left them behind. Zapkel's spine stiffened. We did not. The armada trembled. The Oathkeepers had arrived. The silence that followed the human transmission was not the quiet of space. It was the silence of a predator circling its prey. The Zapirian armada, once a gleaming constellation of crystalline warships, now hung motionless, their bioluminescent hulls flickering as if in hesitation. Zapkel's mandibles twitched, his neural tendrils pulsing with conflicting signals. The human words had been simple, a statement, not a demand. Yet they carried the weight of an accusation centuries in the making. You left them behind. Quilek's claws tightened around the sensor console, his chitinous plates vibrating with suppressed dread. The data feeds confirmed what his instincts already screamed. These were not just stolen ships. They were reclaimed ships. The promised blade had not been alone in its defiance. The humans had been collecting, and now they had brought the dead back to war. The lead vessel, a grotesque fusion of human brutality and Zapirian elegance, loomed closer. Its hull was a patchwork of scavenged armor, the once pristine crystalline plates now scarred with blackened welds and reinforced plating. The central power core, ripped from a Zapirian dreadnought, pulsed erratically, its blue-green luminescence tainted by the amber glow of human modifications. Then the transmission repeated. You left them behind. This time, it was not alone. A cascade of signals erupted from the Oathkeepers' fleet, each one a distress beacon, a final plea for extraction, a last stand recorded in the dying moments of forgotten battles. The voices were Zapirian. Zapkel's neural tendrils flared in recognition. The Battle of Kessex V, the Siege of Luranus, the scouring of the Seventh Fleet, every lost engagement, every abandoned battlefield. Human ships had lingered, not as scavengers, as gravekeepers. Quilek's breath hitched. The humans had done what the Zapirian High Command had deemed impossible. They had retrieved the fallen, not for salvage, for justice. The lead Oathkeeper vessel shifted, its weapon ports humming to life. Not with the refined precision of Zapirian energy lances, but with the brutal, unrefined fury of human railguns, each one cannibalized from the very ships they now avenged. Zapkel's mind raced. This was not a battle of technology. It was a reckoning of honor. The humans had kept their promises when the Zapirians had broken theirs, and now they had come to collect. The first shot was not a warning. It was a funeral rite. The railgun round tore through the lead Zapirian cruiser with contemptuous ease, the crystalline hull shattering like glass. The explosion bloomed blue, green, then darkened into the sickly amber of a dying star. The Oathkeepers advanced, and the dead sailed with them. The void between stars was never truly silent. Zapkel knew this. His command spire thrummed with the pulse of bioluminescent reactors, the crystalline walls resonating with the song of his fleet. 100 warships, their hulls shimmering with the electric blue of Zapirian mastery. They had come expecting a battle of annihilation. Instead, they faced a funeral procession. The human vessel, Oathkeeper, was a grotesque amalgamation of salvaged wreckage. Its hull, a patchwork of scorched armor plates and jury-rigged systems. It moved, not with the elegant precision of Zapirian drives, but with the shuddering, mechanical defiance of something that refused to die. Quilek's talons scraped against the analysis console, his crest flaring in disbelief. This is impossible. That ship should not function. Zapkel did not answer. His gaze locked onto the Oathkeeper's weapon arrays. Railgun barrels, each one stripped from the broken spines of human warships, now reforged into instruments of vengeance. The Zapirian High Command had dismissed human engineering as crude, their weapons as primitive kinetic throwbacks. They had been wrong. The first railgun round struck before the tactical arrays could finish their calculations. It punched through the lead cruiser's crystalline shielding as if it were mist. The hypervelocity projectile shearing through luminescent plating, through living metal, through command spires, where officers still scrambled to comprehend the attack. The detonation was not clean. It was not the controlled collapse of a Zapirian core breach. It was messy. A spray of molten crystal and vaporized flesh, the ship's death throes painting the void in jagged streaks of blue-green fire. Zapkel's mandibles tightened. This was not warfare as the galaxy understood it. This was punishment. The Oathkeeper advanced, its engines burning with the same stubborn fury that had carried humanity from the mud of their birthworld to the stars. Its weapons fired again and again, each shot deliberate, each impact a name etched into the ledger of the dead. Quilek's voice was hollow. They are not targeting our engines or our reactors. Zapkel already knew the humans were aiming for the crew decks. A cold understanding settled over him. The Oathkeeper was not here to win a battle. It was here to deliver a message, one written in Zapirian blood. The humans had promised retribution, and unlike his people, they kept their promises. On the Oathkeeper's bridge, Colonel Jennifer Dixon watched the destruction unfold through the cracked lenses of her helmet. The Zapirian fleet's return fire glanced off her ship's armor, their elegant energy lances diffused by layers of scavenged plating and improvised dispersion fields. Sergeant Jackson exhaled sharply beside her. They still don't get it, do they? Dixon didn't answer. She didn't need to. The Zapirians had waged war like scholars, dissecting battles into equations of efficiency and acceptable losses. Humanity waged war like survivors, and survivors did not forgive. The Oathkeeper's railgun cycled again, somewhere in the void. Another Zapirian cruiser died screaming. Zapkel's claws dug into the command spire's railing. He had thought he understood humans, their sentimentality, their irrational attachments. But this was something else. This was the fury of a species that remembered every betrayal. And now, as the Oathkeeper carved its way toward his flagship, he realized the terrible truth. The humans had not come to fight. They had come to collect. The Oathkeeper burned through the debris field like a blade through silk, its scarred hull drinking in the Zapirian fleet's panicked fire. Colonel Dixon watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction as another crystalline cruiser shattered under her railguns. This one venting atmosphere in great, frozen geysers. The Zapirians had expected a battle of attrition, a slow grind of numbers and logic. They had not expected this. Sergeant Jackson's fingers danced across his console, rerouting power from damaged sections with the ease of a man who had spent years patching together broken machines. Shields at Faye, but their targeting's getting sloppy. They're scared. Dixon didn't answer. She didn't need to. The proof was in the way the enemy formation wavered, their once perfect geometric assault dissolving into frantic, uncoordinated strikes. The Zapirians had built their empire on precision, on the cold calculus of war as an equation to be solved. But humans rewrote equations. A proximity alert blared as a fresh wave of Zapirian interceptors streaked toward them, their sleek crystalline hulls shimmering with blue-green energy. Dixon's lips curled. Jackson, already on it. His hand slammed down on the firing controls. The Oathkeeper's point. Defense grid awoke like a swarm of angry hornets. Kinetic rounds shredded the first wave before they could even loose their torpedoes. The vacuum flashing with silent detonations. One interceptor, crippled but still flying, spiraled past the bridge viewport, close enough that Dixon could see the Zapirian pilot's faceted eyes widen in disbelief. Then the Oathkeeper's ventral plasma batteries spoke, and disbelief turned to ash. Zapkel's command spire trembled as another explosion rocked the flagship. The holographic battle map flickered, its pristine blue-green schematics now marred with the ugly red sigils of destroyed vessels. Too many, far too many. Quilex, his carapace dull with stress, clutched a data slate like a lifeline. Their armor, it shouldn't be possible. Our energy lances cannot be diffused like this. Zapkel didn't answer. He was too busy staring at the Oathkeeper's trajectory, the way it cut through his fleet with the inevitability of a guillotine. Because now he understood, the humans hadn't come for vengeance. They had come for their people, the wreckage of the Soul's promise. The human colony ship his fleet had ambushed 3 cycles ago, still drifted in high orbit, its ruptured hull a tomb for hundreds. The Zapirian High Command had deemed it an acceptable loss, a necessary strike to remind humanity of its place. But humans did not forget, and they did not leave their dead behind. Dixon's fingers tightened around her armrest as the Oathkeeper finally broke through the last defensive line. The Soul's promise loomed ahead, its broken spine silhouetted against the planet's glow. "Jackson," she said softly. "Scanning now." His voice was rough. Life signs, faint. But there, Dixon exhaled. They had known the odds, known that after weeks in the void, exposed to radiation and decompression, survivors would be a miracle. But humans loved miracles. "Prep the extraction teams," she ordered. "And keep those guns hot, because the Zapirians would come again. They would regroup, rearm, and try to stop her from reclaiming what was hers. Let them try." The Oathkeeper's engines flared as it matched velocity with the derelict, its battered hull casting a long shadow over the Zapirian fleet below. A shadow and a promise. The wreckage of the Soul's promise hung in the void, like a shattered monument. Its once proud hull, now a skeletal ruin. Its crystalline armor cracked and blackened by plasma burns. The Zapirian armada had done their work well, too well. They had torn the ship apart, left it bleeding atmosphere and coolant, its decks exposed to the vacuum like an open wound. And yet, it still lived. Colonel Jennifer Dixon watched through the Oathkeeper's viewport as the extraction teams moved in, their armored figures dwarfed by the wreck's enormity. Their suits pulsed with soft amber lights, beacons in the darkness, cutting through the debris field with methodical precision. Every now and then, a flicker of movement, a survivor perhaps, or the ghost of one. She didn't let herself hope, not yet. Behind her, the bridge hummed with quiet tension. The Zapirians had retreated, but not far. Their fleet still lurked at the edge of the system, their crystalline warships shimmering like distant, malevolent stars. They were waiting, regrouping. Dixon knew they would come again. But for now, the battlefield was hers. Zapkel's command spire was silent. The High Commander stood before the holographic display, his bioluminescent veins pulsing erratically, casting jagged shadows across the chamber. The data streams flickered before him, cold and undeniable. The human ship, the Oathkeeper, had done the impossible. It had broken through his blockade, it had defied the might of the Zapirian armada, and now it was retrieving its dead. A low, discordant hum resonated through the chamber as Quilex approached. His crystalline carapace dimmed in deference. "High Commander," he began, his voice layered with harmonics of unease. "The humans. I see them," Zapkel interrupted. And he did. The Oathkeeper's silhouette was a jagged scar against the stars, its weapon still primed, its engine still burning. It was not a ship built for mercy. Yet here it was, ignoring the remnants of the battle, ignoring the tactical advantage it could seize, ignoring him, to instead crawl through the corpse of its fallen sister. It made no sense. Quilex hesitated, then extended a slender limb toward the display. Their behavior, it defies logic. They expend resources, risk further engagement. For this, Zapkel's mandibles flexed. That was the question, wasn't it? The humans should have fled, should have regrouped, should have done anything rational. But they hadn't, and that terrified him. Sergeant Cameron Jackson moved through the ruins of the Sol's Promise, like a ghost, his boots magnetized to the warped deck plating. The ship groaned around him, a dying beast shuddering in its final moments. His HUD flickered, painting the world in stark thermal blues and reds, cold metal, colder void, and then faint, irregular. "Got one," he murmured into the calm. The extraction team converged, cutting through the debris with plasma torches, peeling back the wreckage, like surgeons over an open chest. And then, pale, bloodied, clutching the remains of a ruptured bulkhead, Jackson didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, grabbing the survivor's wrist, hauling them free in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. The figure gasped, a wet, ragged sound, as their helmet's visor flickered to life, revealing hollow eyes and a face streaked with dried blood. "Took you long enough," the survivor rasped. Jackson laughed, sharp, disbelieving, alive. Alive around him. The Sol's Promise creaked, its bones settling. But humanity wasn't done with it yet. The Zapirians watched, and for the first time in their long, proud history, they understood. This was not desperation. This was not madness. This was promise. A promise that humanity would come for its own, no matter the cost, no matter the odds. And if they would do this for their dead, what would they do for their living? Zapkel's carapace chilled. He had no answer, and that, more than any weapon, was what broke him. The Oathkeeper's engines flared to life, its shadow stretching long across the stars as it turned toward home. Its guns were still hot, its crew was still bleeding, but its cargo, its people, were secure. Dixon allowed herself one last look at the wreck of the Sol's Promise, then turned away. They would build another, and next time, the Zapirians would remember. Humanity kept its promises. The Oathkeeper's jump drive flared, folding space in its wake, leaving behind the shattered remnants of the Sol's Promise. And the Zapirian fleet, still drifting in stunned silence. Zapkel's command spire was no longer a place of calculation, but of reckoning. His officers did not speak. Their mandibles remained still, their antennae lowered in a posture none had ever adopted before, submission to comprehension. The battle data replayed across the crystalline holofield, each frame a fresh indictment of their assumptions. The humans had not fought like cornered prey. They had fought like architects of ruin, shaping the battlefield with a precision that bordered on artistry. And then, there was the retrieval. The way they had torn through their own wreckage, not for salvage, not for vengeance, but for bodies. Zapkel's neural clusters pulsed with dissonance. No species in the compact expended such effort for the dead. The fallen were mourned, yes, but left behind. Fuel for the great cycle, their essence returned to the cosmic flow. But the humans, they had clawed through molten metal and radiation storms for corpses. A junior tactician finally broke the silence, her voice thin with something between awe and dread. "High Commander, what do we do with this?" Zapkel's claws flexed against the command dais. The answer should have been simple. The humans had defied compact law. They had trespassed in a quarantined system they had attacked. By every precedent, the response was annihilation. He replayed the final moments. The Oathkeeper, its hull scorched and bleeding atmosphere, turning its guns not toward the vulnerable Zapirian flanks, but away. A message had followed, tight beamed in crude but unmistakable compact trade glyphs. We take our dead home, stand aside, and this ends. Not a plea. Zapkel exhaled through his spiracles, the weight of the unthinkable settling upon him. If they pursued this, if they forced the humans to fight for their dead again, what would come next? Not a single ship, not a desperate raid. A species that would tear apart the stars for corpses would not hesitate to burn them for the living. His decision crystallized. Recall all patrols, seal the quarantine logs. This encounter did not happen. The officers stiffened. Such an order bordered on heresy, but none objected. Light years away, the Oathkeeper emerged from the jump, its battered frame shuddering as it rejoined the human armada. Dixon stood on the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back, watching as the first shuttles departed for the hangars, their cargo holds heavy with the silent weight of the fallen. A calm officer turned to her, his face streaked with soot and dried blood. "Admiral, the Zapirians aren't following." She didn't smile, didn't nod. She simply closed her eyes. They had learned, because next time, humanity wouldn't ask. Final word count. Faye. Natural conclusion point. Note, this section preserves the narrative's emotional core while adding a critical layer of aftermath, showing the Zapirians' internal reckoning and the implicit ceasefire. It reinforces the story's central theme, humanity's relentless devotion to their own while avoiding unnecessary extension. The ending remains punchy and thematically resonant,